as kind of a reminder for our Jehovah's Witness lesson, Colossians 2:8 through 10, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of this world, rather than according to Christ. For in him all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form, and in him you have been made complete, and he is the head over all rule and authority. Now, what is one of the things, one of the hallmarks of a cult? What is one of the things that they do with, say, Jesus? Oh, sorry, Nate, go ahead. They minimize Jesus. What is one of the ways they do that? Sharon, did you have anything you want? All right, so they in many ways, they would actually say that he's the Son of God, but what they would say is they would deny his deity, and they would either say he is not God at all, or he is a lesser, small g, God. It's kind of a problem, isn't it? Now, if you're messing with the deity of Christ, what is going to be another important theological truth that you will then undermine if you deny the deity of Christ? Any? Salvation. Well, salvation, yes, salvation. And what's another one, though? Has to do with God. The Trinity, right? And he's holding up 3 fingers. I got it. All right, Trinity. You're going to mess with the Trinity. Now, remember, what is one of the places that they mistranslate in order to deny the deity of Christ? John 1:1. All right. Great job. All right. So, when we look at this, when we look at the deity of Christ, I really wanted a whiteboard last week because I don't know about you, but sometimes it's more helpful to see things, right? It just can be helpful to see things. And so we're going to do a couple things here before we proceed to the next section. So, what's a definite article? What is not a definite article? Can you give me a description or tell me what a definite article, or tell me an English definite article? The, okay? And what's an indefinite article? A, okay. Excellent. So, let's see if you guys can understand a little Greek. Sound good? And I'm not saying this as someone who knows Greek really well, because I don't. However, I think we can work this out. Now, this is Greek lettering, okay? This is the Greek alphabet. This is what's going on here. But this is N, which is in, okay? N, arche, okay? So anyone have any idea of where arche, archaic, something like that, in beginning? Hey, that's was, and logos. Does anyone have any idea what word, right? Logos. All right. Now I know it's Greek letters, but do you see logos anywhere else in this? Right here, and where else? Right here. Okay. Now in Greek, for this setup right here, the definite article, it actually changes depending on the form of the noun. But the word the in this is that, which is ha. Okay? Do we see the anywhere in here with the ha? 3 times. Where is it? Ha, ha, ha. Okay? Now, with the JWs, now theos is the Greek word for God, and theos is right here. Okay, Theos is God, all right? Now, in the beginning was the Word, or you could say the Word was, okay? And the Word was with the God, okay? See that? So we have, this is just a different form of God, right here. And this actually is the definite article the as well, but it links right here because it's the correct form, okay? So the God, all right, so the Word was with, or towards, it can mean with, the God, all right, so there's that. And God was the Word, okay? So what they like to do is Greek doesn't have an indefinite article. So what they do is, and the Word was a God. Okay? Because, see, there's no definite article. There's a definite article for this God, but there isn't here. The problem is that in Greek, when you're looking at things, typically, if you're trying to figure out the noun versus maybe the predicate nominative, what you actually need to figure out is the subject typically has the definite article, the. In this right here, which one has the definite article? Word or God? Word. So, which one is the subject?
The Word.
The Word. So what they're doing is they're saying when it doesn't need to, because what we're actually doing is this is the subject, and this is the predicate nominative, and this references that. Okay? So it's what we do in English, because Greek, what they do is because of endings and rules like if it's the definite article in front of the noun, it's likely the subject. They can rearrange word order because in English we have, right, the cat is red. Okay? Now we know what's the subject in this sentence?
Cat.
Why? Because of word order. Okay? And then is what? Is it the noun, shows action, or state of being? So it is you can say it, I know, this is like,
Verb.
it's a verb, okay? And then red,
Adjective.
adjective, that's a predicate adjective, okay? Okay, so let's do this. Red, the cat is. Now, we can almost figure that out, right? But that seems kind of weird. But in Greek, you can actually do this and know what the subject is, not based on word order, but based on the form of the noun. And what they might do is do this to emphasize that. Okay? That the fact that the cat is red. So in this structure here, the subject is halagos still. And theos is just reinforcing that the Word was not a God, but God. Does that help? You can see it. I know. It's something we'll probably end up coming back to at some point. But that's just for that. So I'm going to erase this now, because we might use this again in a little while. It's a good eraser. All right. So, based on that, we had started looking at some scriptures. Now, when we're thinking for ourselves, one of the primary, most effective verses to prove the deity of Christ is, in fact, John 1:1. However, we also know that the GAWs they typically have a very by rote memory. I had a coworker who was a Jehovah's Witness, and I was going through something like this in Sunday school. My dad was teaching it, and I said, well, what about, and he just immediately had a whole argument already memorized. And I'm like, well, now what? It's like, I have no idea where to go from here. So it is helpful for our own understanding and our own belief. However, we also looked at a few other places where there is explicit mention of Jesus being God. Now, excuse me. Let's go ahead, and I believe it is either page, I should have numbered these, sorry. It's either page 3 or 4 for you, I'm pretty certain, where we're going to be looking at implicit scriptures regarding the deity of Christ. Now, we're not going to look at all of them, but let's go ahead and go to John 5. John 5. By the way, we are basically building a foundation because guess what? When we start looking at Mormonism and we have to defend the deity of Christ, is there like a whole nother set of scriptures that we have to look at to defend the deity of Christ regarding Mormonism? No, we look at the same ones. So this is just kind of building a foundation. So let's look at John 5, 17 through 18. All right? And, but he was asking them, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. For this reason, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but also was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Okay, so the Jews understood what Jesus was claiming, that he himself was God, and they considered that Jesus was blaspheming. Now, if you look at Matthew 20, we're not going to turn there, but Matthew 26, 63 through 66, John 8, 54 through 59, John 10, 30 through 33, and John 19, 7. In all these passages, the Jews sought to execute Jesus for blasphemy in accordance with Leviticus 24:16, which says, you shall speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if anyone curses his God, then he will bear a sin. Moreover, the one who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him. The alien as well as the native, when he blasphemes the name, shall be put to death. So it's pretty clear. So if Jesus wasn't actually God, he should have been done. What should have happened to him? All right. So this actually is, I don't want to spend too much time, but think about this. People like to say, well, Jesus was a good teacher, right? He was a good teacher. He just wasn't God. Well, here's the problem. Jesus made exclusive claims to be God. If he wasn't actually God, and he claimed to be God, what would that make him?
A liar.
A liar. Is he now a good teacher? No. So, the way you can say it is he's either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. Really are the three options for Jesus. He's either lying, and he's not a good teacher, and we shouldn't follow him. He's either crazy, so he's also not a good teacher, so we shouldn't follow him. Or he's Lord. He is who he says he is, and we should believe in him and follow him and obey him. Those are really the only three options. Okay, so just that's That's a freebie. All right, so let's look now at some more implicit instead of explicit scripture. So John 12:41. And we're actually going to come back to this in a little while. But John 12:41, actually, would someone be willing to go to Isaiah 6? Isaiah 6. Have a volunteer for that? Or do we need, Nate, you're going to go to Isaiah 6? And I want you to read, let's see here, verses 1 through 5. All right? Go ahead. Yep.
Isaiah's vision. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, lofty and exalted, with the train of his robe filling the temple. Seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called out to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds trembled at the voice of him who called out, while the temple was filling with smoke. Then I said, Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts.
All right. That's great. All right. So, who would we say that Isaiah saw in that? We're getting there. He saw God, right? He saw God. Now in John 12, and we're going to actually back up in verse 36. While you have the light, believe in the light, so that you may become sons of light. These things Jesus spoke, and he went away and hid himself from them. But though he had performed so many signs before them, yet they were not believing in him. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet, which he spoke. Lord, who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason they could not believe, for Isaiah said again, He has blinded their eyes, and he hardened their heart, so that they would not see with their eyes and perceive with their heart, and be converted, and I heal them. Verse 41, these things Isaiah said because he saw his glory, and he spoke of him. Now, when we're looking at this passage in 12:41, who is it referring to? Jesus, right? They're saying that Isaiah saw Jesus. Isaiah 6, 1 through 5. That's who Isaiah saw. And so there is an Old Testament reference that the New Testament says specifically, this is Jesus. And so that's one of the implicit scriptures that we can look at and go, yes, Jesus is in fact God. Jesus is who he says he is. He's not a small g God. He's not just a being of power. He is in fact God. Now let's look at another place. John 14:9. Jesus said to him, have I been so long with you, and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? So if we've seen Jesus, we've seen the Father. Does that mean that if you've seen Jesus, that Jesus is the Father? Is that what the passage says? No. Does it say, he's kind of? No, it's pretty clear that if we've seen Jesus, we've seen the Father. Now, next verse, John, that we're looking at is John 20:28. Now, I was listening this past week to a debate of a Christian with a Jehovah's Witness, and the Jehovah's Witness says, well, there really is no problem with Thomas calling Jesus his God. He's just his God out of many. Or he's just a particular God. And Mormons will actually use this too. He's one of many gods. It's his God, but someone else could have a different God. And that kind of is a problem. But so Thomas' statement is in Greek, the Lord of me and the God of me. And again, we have that definite article before God. So ha kurios, the Lord, mu, of me, kai, or and, ha theos, mu, and the God of me. So that's it's in the Greek, it actually is a lot more explicit than implicit once you get to looking at the Greek regarding that. Let's look at a couple other things. So Christ displayed divine attributes. So we're gonna divide things up. So can I have a volunteer to go to Micah 5:2? Jess, all right? And can someone go to John 8:58? Sharon, okay? And can I have someone go to Revelation 1:8? I think I saw Kim. All right? So we're going to do that. So, Jess, are you at Micah 5:2? Go ahead. Nice and loud.
As for you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity.
Sick. Okay, so who is that talking about? It's talking about Jesus, isn't it? His goings out are from eternity. That doesn't sound like a creature that had a beginning, does it? All right. John 5:58.
8:58.
8:58. Yep.
Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am.
Okay. Does anyone remember where in the Old Testament someone was out watching sheep in the desert somewhere and he saw something? All right, Moses in the burning bush. Excellent. Okay. And the voice comes out of the burning bush, and what does God say from the burning bush? Because we know it's God. What does he say? Remove your sandals, for you're on holy ground. And what does he call himself? When Moses says, who should I say sent me? And what does anyone remember what I am basically means? Self-existent one. Needs nothing, needs no one. And in John 8:58, what did Jesus just claim to be?
Before Abraham.
I am. It's pretty clear, isn't it? It's pretty straightforward. Okay, Revelation 1:8.
I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty.
All right, do you know who's talking in that passage? Jesus is talking to John. And he calls himself the what? Alpha and Omega. Beginning and end. The one who was, or who is, who was, and is to come. What does that kind of give the inference to? It's like eternal, right? Okay. So let's go down omnipotence. Okay. So let's go to John 20, 30 through 31. Therefore, many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. All right? Now, what would be, now look at immutability. So Hebrews 13:8. You don't have to turn there. I have it right here. So Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Immutability. Does anyone remember that $2 word or $4? Unchangeable. Who's the only one that's unchangeable? God. Okay, so we have characteristics and attributes of God attributed to Jesus. we're going to skip ahead because we're going to run out of time again. But Christ is given divine names. So, Son of God, it is not a term of inferiority, but equality. John 5:18, we looked at that already. And they said they wanted to stone him. Why? Because he called himself the Son of God, which made him equal with God. All right? We also see that Christ accepted worship. Now, worship of men and angels in Scripture is routinely rejected. Christ, however, accepted it. All right, think about that. So in Acts 10, 25 through 26 and 14, 11 through 15, there's a couple instances where something happens, a miracle is done, and the pagans desire to worship, in one instance, Paul and Barnabas. And Paul and Barnabas immediately start running out and say, when they figure out what's going on, they're getting ready to do a sacrifice to Paul and Barnabas. They're like, don't do it. We're men just like you. Don't do it. They understood the implications. Don't worship someone else other than God. However, when Jesus is given worship, he receives it readily and willingly. Now, I was also, again, listening to a debate this week, and the Jehovah's Witness was trying to say, no, it's perfectly fine that Jesus, the other lesser beings, receive worship. That's okay. And the person who was debating him saying, the problem is as soon as you do that, you make it okay for any other angel, any other created being to be worshipped in something that God claims and demands exclusivity for. It's kind of a problem. Actually, Isaiah 40 through 43, you start reading through that, it gets really interesting, the indictment. We actually were in there this past couple weeks, I'm pretty sure, in Isaiah 40 through 43, right in that area where God says, so here you are, you take your block of wood, you carve part of it for your idol, and then the other part, you go, man, I'm really hungry, and you use it to cook your meal on. So just one of those things that throughout the Bible, God is very clear. Worship is for him and him alone. All right. Christ exercised divine prerogatives. We actually looked at one of them last week in the morning message in Luke 5. Does anyone remember what Jesus said to the paralytic first before he healed him? Is that something that anyone else can do other than God? It's only something God can do. All right? So we really do have to trot along really quick here. So Jesus is not a created being. He is creator. Now let's look at Colossians. I'm going to go to Colossians. If you're looking at your notes, you're probably noticing we are skipping over a lot. I would highly recommend you go back, spend some time. Part of the goal of this series is to give you tools. That's why I typed up, and as I was reading this week, I noticed typos, and I'm like, oh. But anyway, typed up so much information for you is so that you have it. It's a tool. It's a reference guide. Let's take a look. So Colossians 1. And let's see, starting in verse 15. He, that is Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Now, the Jehovah's Witnesses will try to say, look, firstborn. That means he was the first created, and then everything else after that, and then he created everything else. See, firstborn. And it's a term of subservience. So obviously, he can't be God. The problem is, and I'm going to give you the soundbite version, firstborn is a title, or firstborn is a title, not a something about order, per se. For instance, in the Old Testament, the firstborn was the one who inherited the father's things, right? So who is the firstborn of Abraham as far as title goes? Isaac, was he the physically firstborn? Ishmael was the physically firstborn. Who is the firstborn of Isaac? Okay, so Esau was the first physically born, but who is the one who ended up inheriting his father's things? And that was actually told before they were even born, right? By God to Rebekah, all right? So firstborn is a title, not necessarily he was physically born first, okay? So he is the firstborn of all creation. That is the soundbite version. There is far more you can go into detail for that. For by him, by who? Jesus, all things were created, both in the heavens and on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Now, when we look at the word all in this passage, what does all mean? Everything. All means all. I know that sounds really simplistic, but it really is. That's what it means. And they were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body of the church, and he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. Okay, so so we had resuscitations, that Jesus brought people back from the dead, but what happened to them during his earthly ministry? They died. What about Old Testament? Were there a few instances of someone being raised from the dead in the Old Testament? No. Yes, there are. Elijah, the widow's son, but what happened to them again? They died. Has Jesus died again? He's the firstborn from the dead. He's the first one to be resurrected and never die again. Are we all going to be there someday? Okay, so that's again a position. So that he himself will come to have first place in everything. Okay, so that's a little bit there. There's a little bit of history there regarding 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea, which has to do with the defense against false teaching. There was a heretic by the name of Arius who was denying the deity of Christ. 325 AD. There really is nothing new under the sun, is there? We're seeing things again. And what's interesting, though, is in 325 AD, with the Council of Nicaea, they denounced the teaching of Arius. However, what actually ended up happening is even after that, the Arians still got political control. They had the ear of the emperor, and the people who were standing against Arius ended up being either killed or exiled anyway. One of these men was by the name of Athanasius, and Athanasius continued to push back against the teachings of Arianism. If you'd like a really interesting read regarding that, it's short, it's pretty easy. You can ask Justin for his paper that he did on Athanasius. It's short, it's sweet, but it gives enough information to kind of understand what was going on. Also completely anecdotal, and it's probably, it very well could be apocryphal, but you know St. Nicholas, who we get Santa Claus from? There is some church record, possibly, that St. Nicholas was not only, he was an actual person, but he was present at the Council of Nicaea. And the story goes is that when Arius or one of his followers was talking about denying the deity of Christ, St. Nicholas got up and slapped Arius in the face for it. So whether that's actually true or not, don't know, but that's kind of one of those stories that's kind of been around, kind of a fun anecdote. Let's continue on. We talked a little bit last week. We just read in Colossians 1 the New World Translation, which is what? Who puts out the New World Translation? Jehovah's Witnesses put out the New World Translation. So if you're at the Bible bookstore, you're looking for a new Bible translation online, and you see one on Amazon, you're like, hey, that's interesting. Let's see what this says. just don't waste your money. There's a free version online if you want to see, but know that it is not a good translation. It intentionally hides things. It intentionally changes things. So we saw all things, right, were created through him and for him, right? Well, the New World Translation says this. See if you can tell the difference. By means of him, all other things were created in the heavens and on the earth. The things visible and the things invisible, whether they are thrones or lordships or governors or authorities, all other things have been created through him and for him. And also he is before all other things, and by means of him all other things were made to exist. Is there a problem with that translation?
Yes,
Other. You're right. There is nothing in the Greek that would indicate other needs to be there. Okay? The word for all in Greek is panta. Okay, all. All right? So, in regards to only begotten. So here's another thing. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. All right? So here's a fun one, and there's a couple different ways you can address that. Sorry, we're going back to the whiteboard. You ready? Okay, so, mana. Does anyone hear an English word almost? Mono. What does mono mean?
One.
Okay, one. Now, here's where the trickiness comes in. The Greek word only begotten comes from one Greek word, which is monogenes, which mono, one. Sorry. Monogenes. Now, here's where the tricky part comes in. This can mean either to beget, okay? So, in other words, I have a child, right? Or, let's look at this in English. And there's another Greek word that it can be referring to, and I want you to tell me if you can figure out what it is. That is really bad, I'm sorry. Let's try that a little bit bigger. Genus. Well, okay, so what's a genus when we're talking about genus? When we're talking about, say, wolves, foxes, dogs, they're all part of what genus? Canine. Okay, how about lions, tigers, not bears, house cats. What? Felidae, right? All right, they're felines. Okay, so one genes. Actually, there's some English translations that will say his only unique, or the unique son. Because is there anyone else in this genus besides Jesus? That's the other option. There is, if it's going to be beget, they talk about the eternal begetting of the Father of the Son. There are arguments on both sides that you can use. I actually think that monogenes, the unique, or the genus, is probably a pretty good understanding of that. You guys knew a little bit of Greek. Look at that. Good job. Excellent. Okay, so, the time flies when you're having fun. So we are getting closer to the end. Now, we talked about, again, because I really do want to wrap up Jehovah's Witnesses this week, and we're going to start our next part of the series next week. But we also looked that Jehovah's Witnesses deny the Trinity. All right, they deny the existence of the Trinity. Now, if you look at the Old Testament, there are places where you can kind of understand that there is a difference between the Father and the Son. One of those is actually in Psalm 2. So let's go to Psalm 2. But it's not necessarily clear until we have the New Testament. Well, let's go to Psalm 2. And let's start in verse 4. He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Then he will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury, saying, "But as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy hill." So who's talking? God. And he's talking about installing his king upon his holy hill. "I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, 'You are my son. Today I have begotten you.'" All right. Now let's go to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 1. We're doing a lot of flipping, but Hebrews 1. Now, Hebrews 1, or Hebrews in general, is about Jesus. It's how Jesus is better than the previous covenants. Jesus is better than the previous priesthood. And so actually, starting in verse 1, God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days, has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. That sounds very similar to Colossians 1, doesn't it? All right. Now let's skip down. So we know that Jesus is the one being talked about. And let's go down to verse, let's see here. That's verse 6. "And when again he brings the firstborn into the world, he said, 'And let all the angels of God worship him.' And of the angels he says, 'Who makes his angels winds, and his ministers a flame of fire?' But of the Son he says, 'Your throne, O God, is forever and ever, and the righteous scepter is the scepter of his kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your companions. And you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. They will perish, but you remain, and they will become old like a garment, and like a mantle you will roll them up. But a garment they will also be changed, but you are the same, and your years will not come to an end. But unto the angels has he ever said, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet.'" Now, let's see here. Hold on, sorry. I lost my place. But there is several places here. If you have, so let me show you. See how there's it looks like there's quotations going on in Hebrews? Those are all coming out of different places from the Old Testament, all referring back to Christ. All right? And one of the things that is being highlighted in the Hebrews passage is that Jesus is in fact God. All right, so we're going to have to scoot ahead really quick. But JWs deny the Trinity. They deny Christ's physical resurrection. They believe he just it was just a spirit, and when he wanted to be seen by his apostles, he would just kind of materialize, but he didn't actually have a body. The problem with, and you can actually see in your notes, there's a few quotes from them, and they give some passages that they use as their defense for that. Now here's the problem. Let's go to Colossians again, 2, verse 9. Colossians 2:9. For in him, who is that again? Jesus, all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form. Let me ask you a question. Did Colossians get written before or after Jesus' resurrection? Is that important to understand that he's dwelling in bodily form? And by the way, the word body there is soma, which is the Greek word for, believe it or not, body. Go figure. Okay, let's go over to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5. 1 Timothy 2:5. For there is one God and one mediator also between God and men, the man, Jesus Christ. Let me ask again. Was 1 Timothy written before or after the resurrection? After. And how is he described in 1 Timothy 2:15? As a man. That's important. You can also look, Jesus will return physically and visibly. There's passages there. JWs deny conscious eternal punishment, including denial of the existence of hell, and believe in annihilation of all non-JWs. Now, remember, they believe that when you die, you go into what is called soul sleep. There's a couple other things that believe, a couple other belief systems that believe that, but you cease to be conscious of knowing anything that's going on. Did you realize, in reality, when we die, we close our eyes, and then all of a sudden we're very aware of what's going on. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Now, they believe that your body dies and your soul, or your spirit, not your soul, your spirit sleeps. And then when resurrection comes, we're all resurrected, and everyone has an opportunity during the millennial kingdom, except for the JWs that started to doubt JW teaching on the day of Armageddon. If you started to doubt it, you started to think something else on the day of Armageddon, you cease to exist, you're annihilated, too bad for you. Everyone else gets another chance. You live during the millennial kingdom, and at the end of the millennial kingdom, there's going to be a time of testing, and if you pass the test, you will then live forever. If you fail the test, even if you were a faithful JW during your first earthly life, then you cease to exist and you're annihilated. A lot of hope for that, isn't there? But if you weren't a JW and you do pass the test, then you can live forever as well. That's kind of the understanding of things. That's a problem. If you look at your notes, there is conscious eternal suffering that awaits those who reject Jesus Christ. Jehovah's Witnesses deny Christ's physical and visible return. Part of this, they actually initially did believe that Jesus was going to return. The problem is that they started setting dates for his return, and he didn't show up. Go figure. It's like one of those things. When I hear a date, when someone sets a date, I'm like, well, I know he's not going to return then. It's not going to be then. Pretty certain I know when it's not going to be now. Anyway, but they had set up a few different dates. They originally said 1874, and then it got changed to 1914, and then 1925, and then 1975, and then they stopped giving specific dates, but actually what they say is he returned spiritually in 1914. And that's when he inaugurated the kingdom, and the kingdom has started to be working since then. It's very, and something else they learned, what happens is when Christ was supposed to return and he didn't, a lot of people left the Jehovah's Witnesses at that time. They left en masse. And one of the things that the Jehovah's Witnesses have done since then is they've learned, don't change things massively all at once. They will change their doctrine slowly over time to make it more in line with the current trends or whatever it is. They don't do it rapidly. So some of the stuff that we're looking at, you could talk to a Jehovah's Witness today and say, well, no, we're not exactly there. And then they will kind of change things a little bit. They'll be altered a little bit, or they'll have altered the arguments. And so one of the things that know what we believe, understand what we believe, and be able to defend what we believe. But they are constantly working on arguments against this. So something to just think about. A few additional beliefs. They refuse to pledge allegiance to the flag, vote, hold political office, or enlist in the military. They refuse to take blood donations. They refuse to celebrate birthdays or holidays. And we talked about it a little bit, there's the heavenly class or flock, only 144,000. And whether or not this is exactly the case anymore, if it's a hard number or a soft number now, that's up for debate or discussion. But basically, if you're faithful, if you're really faithful and one of the elite Jehovah's Witnesses, then you can go straight to heaven. You don't have to worry about losing your salvation. But the rest, they're kind of with everyone else. They believe Jesus died by being impaled on a stake, a single vertical pole, not being crucified on a cross. And they believe that Jesus is Michael the archangel. They are salvations by work. Now, as we've looked at this, would we say that Jehovah's Witnesses are actually Christians then? No, they're not. They do not. Their understanding of Christ and salvation is wrong. It is incorrect. And if you have your understanding of Jesus incorrect, and you're not actually believing in Jesus who came, died, rose again, if your understanding of Jesus is skewed, your understanding of salvation is going to be skewed. That's just the way it is. Now, on the last page of your notes, there are several links that, of course, if you want an e-copy, email me. I'll send you an electronic copy. Then you can just click on the link and it'll show up. Or you can take the time to type in the link. There's a few different resources to look at. But one of the things that I found helpful, someone who's done a lot of debates, a lot of interaction with them, is a man by the name of James White. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he believes and hold to everything that he agrees, but he has done a lot of really helpful research and looking into Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, actually, and Muslims and Roman Catholics. He's debated all of those groups. And he has some very helpful information. And there's actually kind of some things to think about that I found as I was looking at that. Now, there's a couple places that are quite interesting, and you can use their Bibles for, and we don't have time really, but Psalm 102, 25 through 27, in their scriptures, in their Bible, actually, it's very clear it's God. But then you have them go to Hebrews 1, 5 through 12. And their Bible, they can look at it in their own Bible and say, that's really hard to argue that this isn't talking about Jesus. And don't press them. The other thing that you can do is John 12, 41, and then go to Isaiah 6, 1 through 3. So we are really out of time, but I hope that this has been helpful in trying to understand Jehovah's Witnesses. And I hope that also, instead of developing a self-righteous, those poor saps, looking down at them, they really are people with no hope. They can do everything right, and they still are sitting there at the end of the day wondering if they're right with God. And we know that they're not. And we have the truth. Now, that I do not recommend that we go to the Kingdom Hall and start trying to interact with them or engage with them in that way. But we do pray for them, and if we have the opportunity to say, hey, so look at Psalm 102, and now look at Hebrews 1, that might be just something that gets the sparks going. They are studious, they work hard, but they don't have hope. And I hope that it's helped us to have a level of compassion for them. And at the same time, I do hope that it has helped strengthen our own understanding in the Word of God and of the character and person of Jesus Christ as well. Lord willing, as we start looking through, we're going to maybe highlight some of the other things like the Trinity as well when we look at some of the other, specifically Mormonism. That is going to help with that. Let's close in prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time that you've given us. We thank you for the opportunity to study your word, and we pray that you'd be with us, help us to become more studious, that we'd be desiring to not just learn information or facts, but our desire would be through that information and through the facts that we'd have a better understanding and closer relationship with you and your Son, Jesus Christ. We thank you for all that you've done. We thank you for the faithfulness that you've shown us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You are